For me, being the quiet kid was never unusual. At Goldcamp Elementary, while everyone else was talking with friends or playing games, I was content with swinging on the swings, dribbling a ball, or even walking around. It wasn't because I was antisocial or had some mental disorder. It just felt the most comfortable to me. However, most of the teachers at my school thought otherwise. To this day, I still remember the looks of concern, the overanalyzing of all of my actions, and the labels. Everything from shy to having Asperger's or OCD. And I am not alone. I am introverted, as is 1/3 to 1/2 of the US population according to Susan Cain, the author of Quiet. Introversion is defined as a preference for less stimulating environments. A preference for less pressure and excitement. That's all. However, there is still the misconception among the public, including introverts, that it is a problem. When most people see someone who is alone or quiet, they make assumptions. Oh, that person must not think that he or she fits in, or that kid must not know how to interact with his or her peers, or even, gee, that guy must be a real snob. Now, each of these explanations can be true, but only in certain cases. Most rule out the fact that they might just prefer to be that way. On the other hand, many view introverts as always being soft-spoken, when the exact opposite can be true. In fact, countless actors, writers, and historical figures are introverts. As a result of these false perceptions, introverts go through life feeling that there is something wrong with them. That is why these stereotypes must be eliminated from society. First, I'll explain what it means to be introverted. Then, I will identify examples of introversion throughout history. Finally, I will explain how everyone, both extroverts and introverts, can change to accept and embrace introversion. To begin, we must answer, what is introversion? As I previously mentioned, introverts prefer to not be overstimulated, as opposed to extroverts who thrive on stimulation. This difference is rooted in how the brains of introverts and extroverts process information. According to Dr. Lori Helgo from Psychology Today, research demonstrated that introverts all had higher levels of electrical activity, meaning that introverts limit input from the environment to maintain an optimal level of arousal. Extroverts, on the other hand, seek out external stimulation to get their brain juices flowing. Now, this is not to say that introverts think more than extroverts, but rather that the brain of an introvert processes information more thoroughly than that of an extrovert. In order to avoid being flooded with new information, introverts prefer to be in quieter places or with people they are familiar with and tend to do more listening than speaking, according to the Huffington Post. For that reason, introversion is not interchangeable with shyness. Susan Cain, whom I've mentioned before, defines shyness as the fear of social disapproval or humiliation. To better illustrate this difference, imagine two students enter a cafeteria. One is shy, and one is introverted. The shy student might be thinking, oh, I really want to sit at that table with those kids from my math class, but what if I can't think of anything to say, or I say something stupid? They'll think I'm weird. I better not risk it. Guess I'll sit at that empty table by myself. The introverted student might be thinking, oh, there are those kids from my math class. They sure look like they're having a good time. Oh good, an empty table. I can study for that test after I'm done eating. With two such vastly different trains of thought, how could these people be perceived as the same? Because at first glance, they are. Both are eating lunch by themselves and are thought to be lonely. So how is one to distinguish between the two? By having a conversation with them. In a conversation, the shy person's social anxiety and discomfort will likely cause him or her to give short, curt responses. A conversation with the introvert would be much more natural. He or she may also be a little uncomfortable because introverts don't enjoy small talk, according to the Huffington Post. But he or she would talk more comfortably, even if he or she is listening more than talking. However, introverts are quite capable of doing a lot more talking if they need to. Many famous people were introverted. Take Dr. Seuss, who is viewed as arguably one of the best children's book writers ever. Kids love his musical rhymes and memorable characters. So it is shocking that he would say, en masse, children terrify me. He knew that children would expect his personality to be like the Cat in the Hat if they were to meet him. And he didn't want to disappoint them by being reserved. But being an introvert did not stand in the way of Dr. Seuss infusing his writing with whimsy and enthusiasm. In fact, introverts often participate in activities that one might expect to see extroverts in, such as comedy, acting, singing, or giving speeches. Johnny Depp, for example, is well known as the witty, outspoken Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. At one time, he was introverted to the point of needing therapy to function. Despite needing help to tolerate more external stimulation, he was still able to act in a major motion picture and be the main character on top of that. Depp's experience proves that introversion isn't a bubble that isolates people from everybody else. Introverts are just as capable of doing anything as extroverts are, and introverts have had incredible influence in the past. Gandhi and Rosa Parks are symbols for India's independence movement and the US Civil Rights Movement, respectively. Both of them describe themselves as quiet and soft-spoken, according to Susan King. They were introverted, but not submissive. Both of them not only took a stand against injustice, both were catalysts for profound social change. All of these people, Seuss, Depp, Gandhi, and Parks, have one thing in common. They naturally preferred quiet solitude in familiar situations. They were able to go against those preferences when they wanted to or felt they had to, and the world is better for it. Introversion was not an obstacle for them. That said, how can society change to better understand introverts? This may prove to be a challenge in a world, and particularly in the United States, where extroverts are the majority and therefore the qualities of extroverts are valued more. So let's start with the extroverts. They can change in two simple ways. The first is to hold off on the labels. I know that it's tempting to draw conclusions early and to project your own experience and perception of what is normal onto others. I admit, I've been guilty of that many times myself. Instead, try gathering more information about a person before judging him or her. Here's a good approach. If you notice somebody off by themselves who seems quiet or to you looks lonely, have a conversation with him or her. Don't say, "Why are you so quiet?" or "Are you okay?" From personal experience, that might make the person feel self-conscious or defensive. Instead, try saying, "How are you doing?" or "What are you doing?" Make a little small talk, and only a little, please. If he or she starts looking nervously around, or appears very uncomfortable by you approaching him or her, then there is a chance that person is having some social problems. But if he or she can respond comfortably, then it's probably introversion. This doesn't mean that you should ignore everybody who's quiet. In fact, you should do the opposite. If you're having a meeting or a conversation with a group of people, and one person seems to be having trouble getting involved, ask him or her a question to allow them to speak up, as well as a little time to form an answer. Now for introverts. They can change by recognizing how introversion is a difference, not a handicap. Extroverts may tend to have livelier personalities and be more talkative. It's easy to envy their abilities in social settings, but those are their strong points. Introverts have some of their own. They're more analytical and better listeners than most extroverts. Both sides have their own talents and strengths, and both add value. Now, I know that there are people who will claim otherwise, and there are obviously instances where people need to step outside of their comfort zone. But as I've explained earlier, one only needs to be able to do so to thrive and prosper in life. Lastly, knowledge is power, and so is sharing it. When somebody pesters an introvert about preferring quiet time to party time, they should feel comfortable revealing that they are introverted, what it means, and that they are happy just the way they are. Today, we have learned of a distinct personality and how common it is. Introverts are simply people who don't enjoy and are actually exhausted by too much external stimulation. There are many introverts in society. There are many famous introverts, and introversion is often misunderstood and mischaracterized. I imagine that there are still many students who are being labeled and overanalyzed, much like how I was in elementary school. There is an old saying that still waters run deep, so I would urge everyone to remember that just because a person is quiet doesn't mean that there isn't a lot going on inside, and it might be worth finding out what that